Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another fabulous Friday Rambling. We're here to discuss some more video game magic as we break down one of my personal favorite franchises that I feel has gotten overlooked and forgotten in recent decades, and that is Final Fight. Now, we mentioned the basics of Final Fight before when breaking down the insanity that is the Street Fighter meta franchise, and that is because the two are connected. Final Fight was originally conceived as a spin-off of the Street Fighter series. During development of the first game, it was decided to make its own standalone. However, after they quit making regular Final Fight games, decided to bring the characters in two later Street Fighter games, making them connected franchises officially because it's Capcom and that's what they do. But let's break down the awesomeness of Final Fight. Officially, Final Fight is, as we said, a series of beat-em-up video games by Capcom. Began with the arcade release of Final Fight in 1989. Set in the fictional Metro City, the games focus on a group of heroic vigilantes who fight against the control and various threats of criminal gangs, primarily the Mad Gear Gang. The series has sold 3.2 million units worldwide as of December 31st, 2019. And the original Final Fight was directed by Yoshiki Okamoto, released in arcades and followed by two sequels exclusive to the SNES after the original Final Fight game was ported to many consoles, including the Super Nintendo. Now, the sequels were produced specifically for the home console market and therefore was led by a different division, this time Tokuro Fujiwara, with no preceding arcade versions. The original Final Fight game sets the standard for the plots of all Final Fights sequels to follow, and that is the Mad Gear Gang causes trouble in Metro City, and various heroic types who like to fight step in. Here's where things get plot specific. The game is set in the early 1990s. The city of Metro City's crime rate has reached critical levels, but due to the election of pro wrestler turned politician Mike Hagar as the new mayor, Metro City very rapidly sees itself getting cleaned up and the crime rate dropping. Under his term, Hagar managed to suppress the crime rate of the city to its lowest points, and the citizens loved him. However, the Mad Gear Gang, who was the last major gang standing and the dominant criminal organization of Metro City, decided that since they could not get Hagar on their side with traditional briberies and simple direct threats to him, because, hey, the guy's a former professional fighter, he ain't scared of somebody saying they want to beat him up. The Mad Gear Gang, led by crooked businessman Belger, decides to kidnap Jessica Hagar and create further unrest among the citizens while Mike is doing like all fathers do and focusing on his daughter. Unfortunately, they underestimated Mike's decision to deal with things directly. Mike takes to the street and starts dismantling the Mad Gear Gang one boss at a time. However, knowing he can't do it alone, Hagar recruits Jessica's boyfriend, an expert fighter in his own right named Cody Travers, as well as Cody's good friend, ninja in training, Guy. Everything is brought to a head when they confront Belger in his office, and upon beating him down, launch him through the window of his high-rise office, which means he goes fall splat. The game was infamous on many fronts, mostly for the continue screen, which showed the player character tied to a chair with a bundle of dynamite on the table in front of him. Character struggling to escape as the continue time limit counts down. The player activates their continue option and a knife falls in the ceiling, disconnecting the fuse from the bomb. They do not explode. Game over. Now it should be noted that as things have been discussed here and there in other ramblings, as well as my many playthroughs of the Final Fight series on my sister show right here on the Roulette Productions, the Bardic Flays series. Cheap plug. Yep, we do it. When converting things over to the SNES port, there were some changes made. Specifically, that... Actually, it's not even just the SNES port. Okay, let me actually go back a step. In the original Japanese version, the gang featured two females known as Poison and Roxy. When the American version was brought over, they were still present, although their outfits were modified slightly to make them a little less revealing. Their Daisy Deuce-esque short shorts extended just a couple inches longer, and their ragged, ripped-up tank tops went slightly farther down as well. The original Japanese arcade version, resulting in the occasional very quick frames of underboob as you're fighting them. The American arcade version, getting rid of the underboob. However, because in America we have different ideas of gender violence, even in the late 80s, this whole thing began where it was said that they were not actually women, but men who saw themselves as women, which created a character plot disconnect between the two countries' versions that would haunt things for a long time until ultimately some people at Capcom in Japan just said, you know what, we got about 3 different stories going right now. It's whatever you guys are comfortable with. Whatever you want to see Poison as, that's who Poison is, because Poison is ultimately a fictional character. However, with the SNES home port, they decided to go full-blown and redigitize the Poison and Roxy sprites into new male characters. These American versions will also see the renaming of several characters to remove their slightly more PG-13 R-rated names and make them names that potentially little children could see and repeat and not freak out their parents. But that's okay, because it is still Mayor Mike, Cody, and Guy whooping butt to save the girl and the city, and that is the gloriousness of it. This is fun times. Now, the game was also released to various other home consoles at the time: the Amiga, the Atari ST, Commodore 64, ZX Spectrum, and Amstrad CPC, along as well as eventually seeing re-release on the Sega CD as Final Fight CD, a Game Boy Advance version called Final Fight 1, as well as being part of various compilations and collections. The one I would recommend if you are interested in playing this game in modern times is the Capcom Beat 'em Up bundle, which includes several other beat-em-ups that Capcom has produced over the years, and is available on all current, is available on the Nintendo Switch, Steam, as well as previous gen consoles, PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. The main reason I recommend that is that in the Capcom Beat 'em Up collection, you have the option of playing both the Japanese and American versions of the arcade original. And so you can do your own compare and contrast of the changes. Now, it should also be noted that the SNES port did not have all 3 players included. The original version had the choice of Mayor Mike and Cody. They later released a revised edition of the SNES port in 1992 called Final Fight Guy, in which Cody was replaced with Guy as one of the selectable characters, as long as a couple more difficulty settings to fine-tune the, well, difficulty of the game for veteran players, and a couple more new power-ups. Although one of the stages, the industrial area, is still missing. Despite these various changes, though, the SNES port was still considered the definitive port of Final Fight's arcade original, hence why the 2 sequels were released on the SNES. So let's get to them. Final Fight 2 came out in 1993 and would change up a couple of things. Mike Hagar returns as the mayor. However, Cody and Guy are replaced by Carlos Miyamoto and Guy's cousin and the first playable female in the Final Fight series, Maki Genryosai. The game's plot: 3 battle the resurgent Mad Gear gang at various locations around Asia and Europe to rescue Maki's sister and father, who are also the fiance and teacher, respectively, of Guy from the first Final Fight. So wait, no, excuse me. That's how Maki and Guy are related. Not that they're cousins. Maki is the sister of Guy's fiance. Excuse me, misspoke. That's what I get for not double checking my notes before I speak. Thus, it is still the Mad Gear gang, but we have new locations. We are traveling around the world. The game features, in one particular stage, a blinking Mystic cameo appearance in the background of Chun-Li as she is eating at an outdoor restaurant. So, yes, even as far back as Final Fight 2, Capcom could not 100% divorce their Street Fighter connections. That's okay, though. By and large, the gameplay remains the same. There's a total of 6 stages in the game, each set in a distinct Eurasian location: Hong Kong, France, Holland, England, Italy, and Japan. The only returning characters from the original SNES game is Rolento, a boss character who was in the first Final Fight game but omitted from the SNES port as his stage was omitted, and the Adore family, which I also got to discuss as well, because the Adore family are the largest brutes that are common enemies in the game and are infamously modeled after real-life professional wrestler who was big both in Japan and America, Andre the Giant. Adore, Andre, you see the connections. Adore is one of those characters who would leak over into the later Street Fighter games, where he was renamed Hugo, which is ultimately still a reference because Hugo is a French connection due to famous writer of, God, I'm sitting here forgetting my last names here. Victor Hugo. Thank you. Hugo was the last name. Victor Hugo, who wrote The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Andre himself being a Frenchman, as well as Hugo sounding like huge, huge, giant. Get it? His name on most Capcom boards is sometimes officially stretched out to be Hugo Andore, Andore being the family name. But still, huge Andre. Andre the Giant. See? Now, as I said, the game was quite a success and led to Final Fight 3 on the Super NES and ended the classic trilogy. The game features the return of protagonist Guy along with Mayor Mike Hagar, as well as introducing new characters, Lucia, who is a part of the Metro City Police Department, and Bad Boy Dean. The game's plot takes them through the efforts to rid Metro City of the new Skull Cross gang, who has filled in the power vacuum left by Mad Gear. Final Fight 3 introduced new moves as well as branching paths during gameplay and multiple endings. The game itself, due to the fact that the core mechanics were not greatly improved or enhanced, led to it being the lowest selling of the 3 games, and as such, causing Capcom to take their time deciding what to do with the future of the Final Fight franchise. Still, it is a fun game in its own right, and should be checked out if you enjoy the first 2 Final Fight games. Now, one of the few new things introduced in the game is that the player can now perform dashing attacks or dashing jump attacks, which was a mechanic lifted from Capcom beat-em up Captain Commando. Now, what makes this interesting is that the plot of Captain Commando takes place far in the future, and the first stage is a future Metro City. Thus, after the first Final Fight game, they released Captain Commando, which had connections to Final Fight and introduced a mechanic that would later be picked up in Final Fight 3. You see how it all works together when you are a company whose developers and programmers are paying attention to what works and what is fun to play in different games. Yay! There are a total of 6 stages in the game in Final Fight 3, each with a unique boss character. And various stages in the game feature multiple paths to change the area the players will visit, as well as the enemy and bosses they encounter. The game's ending changes depending on the selected character, the path taken to reach the end of the game, and the difficulty setting. Now, personally, while I am by and large a Mayor Mike player, I do admit that I am fond of Lucia herself. What can I say? I like a lady in uniform. So, where do we go from there now that the classic trilogy's over? Well, before it was all said and done, in its last years, the NES got a pseudo-parody, pseudo-remake of Final Fight under the name Mighty Final Fight, featuring chibi version of the original Final Fight characters and a plot that has the more PG-13 elements dumbed down a bit, thus making it more palatable for the younger audience. We would also get a fighting game spin-off presented in a 3D style, Final Fight Revenge, for the arcades and the Sega Saturn, but only in Japan. Final Fight Revenge would feature Cody, Guy, and Hagar, along with Poison, Andore, Rolento, Eddie E, and a couple other people who were boss characters from the first couple games, along with a zombified version of Belger, the final boss from the original Final Fight, appearing as the non-playable final enemy to destroy, thus implying this game takes place after the events of Final Fight story-wise, as Belger is now undead after falling from his high up in the air skyscraper office. Now, as we said, this would not be the end. Guy, Cody, Poison, Endore, Relento, Sodom would all appear in various Street Fighter games, as well as the Marvel vs. Capcom series. So, that's good news. However, we are not technically done. Again, Final Fight Revenge, as far as a fighting game goes, it's kind of awkward, a little goofy, but, you know, if you're a big fan of the fighting genre, there's worse games to play. Ultimately, we saw, released on the PlayStation 2 and the Xbox, one more attempt to do something with the Final Fight franchise, and this is Final Fight Streetwise. This was a return to the beat-em-up genre, and only features one choice as a playable character, Kyle Travers, younger brother of Cody from the first game. Hagar and Guy also make appearances in the game's story mode, which has Kyle battling a maniacal priest named Father Bella and the illegal drug Glow throughout Metro City. Chronologically, the game takes place after the classic trilogy and was not received well. In fact, it was widely panned by critics on both platforms. Ultimately, I don't think anybody's ever given it a favorable review, as there is many flaws in the mechanics and story, camera angles, basically everything you can do wrong in a game, they did wrong in this game. So, the world is still waiting for a proper Final Fight 4. Will we ever get it? I don't know. But wait, I'm sorry. We got one more spin-off. Saturday Night Slam Masters, which would see a tag team focused sequel, is a pro wrestling game that would feature Mike Hagar as one of your playable characters. There is some slight debate due to the fact that it's a wrestling game. There is little to no storyline to it. Whether these games are meant to be a prequel showing Mike's professional fighting career before he became mayor, or takes place after the Final Fight series, where once his terms as mayor are over, Mike returns to his fighting roots. It's kind of one of those things that, depending on what country and how you interpret the little bit of story given, it's one or the other. Still, it is an interesting game. Worth checking out if you're a fan of wrestling games, or just need a little bit more Mayor Mike in your life. Still, as I said, the legacy of Final Fight stays alive throughout the Street Fighter games, as it seems like once they started showing up in the Street Fighter Alpha series, Final Fight characters will not leave the Street Fighter roster, which is good news for those of us who adore the Final Fight series. This is my go-to beat-em-up game. I love it. I've played the original one in various formats, all of which are available, once again, on the Bardic Plays channel, or rather the Bardic Plays playlist on this channel, Roulette Productions. Good times, good times. Cheap plugs. As well as having played Final Fight 2 and 3. They're all perfectly fine games and great examples of the beat-em-up genre. I know many people consider Streets of Rage the penultimate classic series, which was exclusively on the Sega Genesis. As far as home release goes, I enjoy Streets of Rage. I have nothing against Streets of Rage, but I do lean a little bit more towards Final Fight, mostly because of Mayor Mike. What can I say? There is something about a guy who is willing to take off the suit, hit the streets, and deal with crime directly and with a note of finality that you just gotta love in a politician. As I said before, you can check out the original Final Fight. It's arcade version, which was the original version. Original. In the Capcom Beat 'em Up collection, which is still widely available in various hardware configurations. No matter how you like to play, you like it steamy, you can do it on Steam. You like the PlayStation, you like the Xbox, you like the Switch, you can play it on any of those. And best of all, when you're done playing, check out some of the other one-off beat 'em up games in the series. They're all good. Or you can just watch me play them all. Or cheap plugs. Cheap. But if you don't want to watch me play the video games yourself, you can simply come in around this time in 7 days, because the Friday Ramblings will be here for you every Friday. Stay happy, stay healthy, and remember, if you have not already, hit that notification bell to know when the new videos drop, even though they are quite well scheduled. It always helps to have that reminder. And hit that subscribe so you can easily find your way back to the channel to rewatch videos when you're waiting for new ones to drop. Do so. Leave comments. We love our comments. I truly do. And remember, if you have any suggestions for future topics, check it out. I will be happy to hear your suggestions. We are here for all of you, because it's all about having a good time. Bye-bye, folks.